Hey PTA Global Community, Rodney Korn here. And if you don't mind, I would like to take just a couple of minutes to talk about this research article that I found a few weeks ago that really got me excited on a lot of different levels. It combines and really ties together a lot of the components that you hear us talking about, that you've seen over the last couple of weeks on our Facebook page. And it has a lot of powerful, practical application when we use it right. So what I want to do is try to take this tornado that's circulating in my head, try to create a funnel and make it touch ground so I can spread some practical application and some good useful information based upon this, if that's okay. What I'd like to do is touch on two key areas. One is the industry issues and some of the challenges we face in the industry based upon research, and two is a quick solution. So here's how I'd like to attack that. I want to go through the article and just give you the quick skinny, the rundown of it, and then look at how we kind of take that astray. We take this information, we go off on it on a tangent, and we kind of skew people's vision, their concept, their perception of it, and it really hinders us as trainers from applying the truth and getting the most effective programming strategies that we can from the science. So let's go through that if that's okay. The title of this research article is called The Effect of Acute Aerobic and Resistance Exercise on Working Memory. The Effect of Acute Aerobic and Resistance Exercise on Working Memory. Now what it's looking at is the effect of exercise basically on cognitive function, brain function. So if you've been around the PTA Global community or been around the industry for a while, you've seen and heard, I'm sure, the power of movement on the brain. Bobby Capuccio does an absolutely phenomenal job talking to us through videos and through all mediums about how movement affects cognition, how it affects the neurochemistry, how it affects the brain. Dr. Roy Sugarman, who's also been a part of our Facebook and piped in on many different posts. He's a neuroscientist out of Australia, and he talks about just the massive impact that movement and certain types of movement will have on brain function and altering moods and creating strategies around that. If you've seen the book Spark by Dr. Rady, then you've experienced the revolution that's taking place. But we now know when we move, it affects the brain. We can't separate the body. We can't compartmentalize it. And so based upon that, this article is looking at one of those particular things, which is working memory, which is an executive function of the brain, which is cognition. So what this article did, these researchers took a group of college students, and each college student went through a certain training session. So one was a typical cardio training session, and one was a typical resistance training session. Now the cardio training session was based upon the ACSM guidelines for improving aerobic capacity, which is 30 minutes of motion or activity at 60 to 70% of VO2 max. The resistance training particular session was based upon the NSCA guidelines for improving muscle capacity, which is 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions at an 80% of 1 repetition max. And there's 60 seconds of rest in between each set and 90 seconds of rest between each exercise. A total of 6 exercises, 1 for the legs, chest, back, shoulders, bis, and tris. Okay, so those are the protocols. Now, here's what they did. Each student went through 30 minutes of cardio, and then they did an assessment on their memory, and then they did the resistance training and assessment on memory. It was counterbalanced, so not everyone did the same order. Some people did resistance first or cardio first, so that's irrelevant. But the finding was that the cardio group had significant improvement in memory, and the resistance training group did not. So here's what happens in the industries. We will look at this. Most people will read the abstract. Some people will read through the article and say, yeah, followed all the guidelines, had great guidelines from very reputable sources, had a good study design. So yeah, so what we should be doing is cardio is better for the brain than resistance training. And there's a few other studies that'll talk about how cardio is, when it's looked at relative to resistance training, that it has an impact on brain, and we should be doing aerobic or endurance training for brain function. And that's where the issue stems from, is this segregation. Because what we do is we label that cardio training is this, and resistance training is this. Now you've heard Scott Hobson. If you've been around Scott Hobson very long, you've heard him so adamantly speak about that. And that's part of what we do at PTA Global. So when we compartmentalize things, we put ourselves in a box. We put ourselves in a box, we limit ourselves. And when we limit ourselves, we don't deliver the most effective and efficient applications and programming strategies for our clientele. And that's why so many people leave the clubs, because they're not getting met where they need to be met, because we're telling people that if you don't do cardio with me, I'm not going to improve my brain function. And that's not true. And let's look at how that is. So the issue, a lot of times, one of the issues in our industry is that we take research, evidence-based, and then we go out and we make a guideline that says, if you want this result, you've got to do this protocol. And what we'll find is that's actually false, and that's not really true in this case.